The heavy wooden doors creaked open as Lieutenant Commander Riley James was led into the courtroom. The chains around her wrists clinked softly, but the silence that followed her entrance was louder than any sound. Rows of polished brass uniforms, stiff suits, and curious civilians turned to stare. Her posture was perfect, shoulders square, chin lifted, but her eyes told a different story. They were tired. Haunted. Riley wore her Navy uniform with quiet pride. A small seal insignia sat above her heart, and a few ribbons of valor were neatly aligned on her chest. But none of that mattered now. Not to the courtroom. All they saw were the handcuffs. The whispers started quickly, low, sharp, and venomous. She disobeyed direct orders, someone muttered. Reckless, arrogant, went rogue, said another. No one spoke of the dozens of lives she'd saved. No one mentioned her decorated service or the impossible missions she had survived. In their eyes, she wasn't a hero today, she was a liability. Riley said nothing as she was brought before the judge. She didn't flinch. She didn't beg. Her silence was louder than their accusations. She knew what she'd done. And she knew why. But as she stood alone, hands bound before the very system she had sworn to protect, the question hung unspoken in the air. Was this how a country treated its quietest heroes? Or had they simply forgotten what real sacrifice looked like? The courtroom settled into a tense stillness as the prosecution began laying out the charges. A crisp-voiced JAG officer stood confidently, flipping through a folder thick with classified reports and transcripts. Lieutenant Commander Riley James stands accused of insubordination, disobeying direct orders, and engaging in unauthorized engagement during Operation Iron Shield, he declared. Her actions jeopardized the mission and placed lives at risk. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Riley remained unmoved, her hands still cuffed, her expression unreadable. The prosecutor continued, painting a picture of a lone operative who defied command protocol and altered the mission without authorization. There was no strategic gain. No clearance. Her decision was reckless and cost the Navy valuable time and assets. But he didn't mention what she had seen on that recon drone, the village full of innocent civilians, including children, seconds from becoming collateral damage in an airstrike. The defense barely spoke. Riley had refused to explain her actions in detail. She didn't name names. She didn't ask for protection. When the judge turned to her and asked if she had anything to say, she simply said, "I saw people who were about to die. I had the chance to stop it. So I did. I don't regret that." Her words hung in the air, bare, raw, unapologetic. In the rows behind her, officers and officials sat stiffly, avoiding her gaze. No one stood for her. No one asked why she had to make that choice alone. Not yet. Just as the judge prepared to render a decision, the double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a sudden force that silenced every breath in the room. All heads turned. In strode Admiral Thomas Grant, a legend in the Navy, a decorated war strategist whose mere presence carried weight heavier than any rank could measure. His uniform was immaculate, his medals glinting in the overhead lights, but it was his eyes, stormy and determined, that captured everyone's attention. Every officer in the room instinctively rose to their feet. Even the judge paused mid-sentence. Without waiting for permission, Admiral Grant walked to the front of the courtroom and faced the bench. "Your Honor," he said with a clear, commanding voice, "I request to speak before any ruling is made." The judge nodded, stunned. Grant turned slowly, his gaze landing on Riley. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, respect, perhaps guilt, and something deeper, the weight of shared truth. The mission in question, Operation Iron Shield, was compromised, he began. What Lieutenant Commander James did wasn't disobedience. It was duty. He stepped closer. "She came to me with intel that civilians were in the blast zone. I made the call, off the books, to allow her to act. She risked her career to do what was right. And I stayed silent to protect higher command. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Admiral Grant's voice cracked as he added, "But I will not let her take the fall for doing what we trained her to do, protect the innocent at all costs." For a long, suspended moment, the courtroom didn't move. It was as if time had been paused. Eyes darted from the Admiral to Riley, then back to the judge, who now looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him. A stunned silence lingered, then someone at the prosecution table dropped a pen. The sharp click echoed like a gunshot. The judge adjusted his glasses, clearly shaken. "Admiral Grant. Are you stating under oath that you authorized Lieutenant Commander James's actions?" "Yes," the Admiral replied firmly. "Off the record. Because red tape was going to kill innocent people. I trusted her judgment. And she was right." A soft murmur grew into scattered gasps among the seated officers. The room began to stir with whispers, not of condemnation now, but of awe, of realization. Riley, still in cuffs, met the Admiral's eyes. He gave her a quiet nod, a soldier's acknowledgement, heavy with gratitude. The judge looked to the bailiff. "Remove those cuffs. Immediately." As the chains dropped from her wrists, Riley flexed her hands, bruised, calloused, and finally free. An officer in the back slowly stood, then another. Within moments, the entire courtroom, officers, lawyers, even civilians, rose in silence. Not a single word was spoken. No one clapped. But the way they stood, straight, solemn, eyes on her, was more profound than any applause. She had been judged once. Now, she was being recognized. Not just for her actions, but for the impossible choice she had made when no one else would. Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the steps. The air was quiet, but the energy had shifted. Reporters stood in respectful silence. Officers lingered nearby, some standing at attention, others watching with quiet reverence. Riley stepped out slowly, her hands finally free, the weight of her cuffs gone, but the memories still etched in every breath she took. She hadn't smiled all day, but her face was no longer hard, just calm. Centered. Standing beside her was Admiral Grant, now more of a comrade than a superior. "You didn't have to take the fall alone," he said softly. "I did what I had to," Riley replied. "Someone had to make sure they lived." Suddenly, a small group approached from the crowd. Young naval cadets, all in uniform. At the front was a young woman, no older than 20, who stepped forward with trembling hands. "You don't know me," she said, voice shaking. "But I read about you. We all did. I was ready to quit. Thought I didn't belong here. But today, you gave me someone to believe in." Tears welled in Riley's eyes, but she blinked them back. She simply nodded, placing a hand gently on the cadet's shoulder. She hadn't fought for praise. Or headlines. She had fought for people, strangers, innocents, and now, unexpectedly, the next generation. As she turned to walk away, the crowd parted not out of obligation, but out of respect. Riley James, once handcuffed in silence, now walked freely, as a symbol of what it truly means to serve.